Page 3, Praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings and go to refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings and go to refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the foe destroyer, completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who were wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom motion like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Saviour having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts. To you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 every devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bound with bodies as many as all realms, atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith, I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the old faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. To page 15, the Heart of Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on massive lotus mountain in Vajragya, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perfection. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of apparent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage tread who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness. Without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata Gate Gate Padagate Padasamgate Bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan rose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoiced. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadeviputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised. That's spoken by the Bhagavan. To page 25 for the short mandala. Dashi Rirabling Jini Gambade Sange Shingyo Mite Uwagi Drogananda Shingla Chopasho Jetsa Lama Dapa Kenanji Chukukala Jenze Junjene Cheta Sambe Duje Zimala Saje Shuji Chava Abdoso Guru Rane Mendela Kamniya Dayamis Sanje Jodan Saji Jodan Janjo Bado Dani Jazon Take Chujin Jive Sonanje Dola Benji Sanje Dovara Sanje Jodan Saji Jodan Janjo Bado Dani Jazon Take Chujin Jive Sonamje Dola Benji Sanje Dovara Sanje Jodan Saji Jodan Janjo Bado Dani Jazon Take Chujin Jive Sonamje Dola Benji Sanje Dovara Kange de Zenye Save Dawa Danje Pamani Demish Nindeze Godam de la Chatel Donye Yinde Sunde Jubela Chije Zé Kanche Dindre Jana Bema Dinde Jazol So de Yene Lano Bande de Lama Rambaje Davi Ningra Bende de Jone Godin Megone Jazonde Gozondo Jengo Zedo So Hai Tanzo Gulong Kom Tes Chikapro Da Tanda Ngondo Jin Kapshiba Shita Tirin Shishi Lam Shig Number Tadu Sangma Tanda Chanju Sembe Juji Yunden Shig Yorwa Jodan Chanju Semba Duzoda Shinduen Bashi Ganjan Chig Yor Shinduen Bashi Chewal Dene Rang Tun Dugur Shing Tun Dugore Ni Sonam Teladine Sagayore that Diva Chanya de Zo Chanju Simla Dene Ni Changdu Yore Jeda the Indu Zangalata the Jungaranzo
다 추기 닝부라고 들어. 추기다 내가 치슈라고 들어. 최단 디인장에 전주쌤바드즈 전주쌤 깨바나 신신아야 니마트리네. 전주쌤 깨와치기 대지되는 디 저디닝기여 선배고네. 그로 야고 직세다 봐.
So first setting motivation in terms of studying, listening to Ornaments for clear realization should be that of bodhicitta. And in that sense, the bodhisattvas, when they're training in the aspects, when they're training in the path, they have to know what are the things to be known in common sense with the basis, but also these path things. So essentially, the bodhisattvas are training in a mind that benefits others, the benefiting intention. And by doing so, they accomplish the deeds of both self and other. And in doing so, they accumulate a vast store of merit upon which they can quickly purify obscurations. Therefore, what we are about to practice is the essence of Dharma, the very essential essence of Dharma. So, in that sense, just like the bodhisattvas of the past trained in that way, I will likewise train in order to listen to these teachings, motivated like that.
아야 다 가고 드린 딘데기 다 추사치 뭐지 인기 총한테 깨워서 인 되어.
Now rejoice, thinking how wonderful it is one has the opportunity to hear such holy Dhamma.
아야 다 먼저 두섬다나디리 추 탐제로 남바산제비 나 남바산제비 슝 시단 제비나 추 탐제 아니 유단 유진이 스튜디오여로 추 유드야 유진 스튜디오여레스로.
Let's reflect like this. If we look at all of the teachings within Buddha Dharma, the doctrine, it can be subsumed into objects and object possessors, or objects and subjects.
다 유진 스튜디오 다 단답게 유진이 쉐발을 거라.
Yep.
쉐바체 아니 쉐바 마인베 저 탐제라 유스지와 디세워지 신고 요레스다.
Now, in one sense, if we look at that second category of subjective minds or object possessors, that is consciousnesses. Anything other than a consciousness falls into the former category of objects.
다 남바산지에 추억이 냠랭그린 바로 직세 이hundu 다도 유 람그린 바 캠버스음 사지 그신 셰임바 람 니시시 람시 남겐시 캠버스음 제 아니 조와시 되부추 세데 뭐 예시가 요다 되나네 캠버스음 그나라 최담제야 캠버스음이 나라 뒤로 요야로
Now, in terms of practicing the valid path consciousnesses, they can all be subsumed into the three exalted knowers, the knower of basises, the knower of paths, the exalted knower, and then the resultant states of a Buddha, a fully awakened being. In short, everything can be subsumed into that.
다드네 캠버스음 가래라인데 시실람시 남지 숨제 시실세데 가래라디 박배주 형조 박바스니 수수 겨울에 나랑들이 개와디 박바다 동반이 무슨데 말을 단다 시시세데 박배주지 아니지 댐바시 무슨도 도벨람 미다바 탐몽 무슨도 도벨람 미다바 탐모도 박배 미숑 무슨 박배주람시 요말 무슨 도야 돼 안 댐바시 무슨도 도야 아니 간상게 담에 무슨도 도 어딘데 글람들라 아니 시시스진라고 요레스로
So looking at those three categories of three exalted knowers, the first one of the knower of basises, we're talking about Aryas or superior in the sense that they are superior to us in that they have had our direct insight into the Four Noble Truths, subtle impermanence, and the non-self of persons.
다 시시세요 시시사데 다 시와 박배주지 아니 다람 봐 박주기 람이 뭐 간식라 그 가르친 거래라도 간사답니다 딘실라서 거다 신기어 무슨 뜻이고요 다 딘데기 신이기 시시디라 아니 유지 퇴남당 신남스 그 넘버 직제로 퇴남스도 그 신약의 유디제로 또 유진으로 유진선사 시시디 파주 캠바선사 유진선사 그 신약의 유디라 퇴남시 다 근데 신이기 시시 코란 가서다면 무슨 또 람디 코란 아야 아니 신남스 신남체
Yeah, number shepherd이라.
두스 제도 시시기 남바들라 되제 퇴남당 신남스 되제 이체용으로
Right, so then the Arya's path, we have to ask, what does such an Arya being know in their mental continuum? Directly, they have realized the non-self of persons. But we can divide that into two aspects. There's the object that they're focusing on, that aspect, which is the non-self of persons. But there's also the subjective knower of that aspect. So subjective and objective. So an aspect, non-self of persons, and a knower of aspects, that Arya's continuum mind.
다게 생각은 시시 남바들라 뉴시잡디 셰임바 뉴시잡디나네 아니 덴바시 당행에 랍송아 덴바시 무슨 도베 람딜라 아니 시시스기 요래 라비온데 다 덴바시들라마 유 덴바시들라 당가체윤데 아니 대진 다 뉴시잡디 용고요래 뉴시잡디네 간데레 라비온데 덴바 당보스음라 시시스디 동해된 뭐 군전도 뭐 꼭된 대숨라야 아니 시시시시 시숨 중리로 다디 당부 당가자인데 퇴남게 남바디게 마접 아니 퇴나다 뭐였어요 단다데 당가접도 두스자로 다디 신이게 아니 시시죠로 어디 시시기 신남스다 디 칼라도는 디나라 어디로 와다 디 신남사데 시기요로 신남게 가르친 거였으나 퇴는데 신기요라 퇴신하게 퇴는데를 당가자로 당가니 유지잡된데 덴바 당보스나 시시라빈다 동해대백의 제주 미다 동해 동화담의 군jon대배 주군조랍지 진시 고den게 고바 아니 나 고바시와 저놈 니와중와 시디 다시 중이 차서
Chunirwa.
디제데 네 덴바시기 체주 시시티 신예기 네 시시딜라야 네 시시기 신남 어두스엔다 마 여체운데다 덴바시나라 뒤사도 최담제데 뒤로다
Yes. So we talked about this area being having certain things that they have to know, certain things they're going to meditate on, and these things will be by the Four Noble Truths. And each of the Four Noble Truths has aspects related to each of the truth individually. So these are truths to be known, or aspects to be known by that meditator, the Arya, and the Arya themselves is the knower of those aspects. So if we break down the knower and the known, as it were, so let's look at the aspects to be known first. There are four aspects with regards to the first noble truth of suffering. What are the four aspects to be known? Impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and selflessness. Secondly, there are four aspects to be known with the second truth, true origins. What are those four aspects to be known? Cause, origin, strong production, and condition. Thirdly, there are four aspects to be known with regards to the third truth, true cessations. What are those four aspects to be known? Cessation, pacification, sublime, and definite emergence. So of those first, of the 27 aspects to be known by this knower basis, this Arya, we've been through the first 12 of those aspects relating to the first 3 of the 4 noble truths.
No. 다 동해 덴발라디 친시샤연데 말아주 풍부들이와 수수 만주 류딘 다가라래 당나주 사전 여월렘be 풍부디 동해 덴발에 다들라 체주 제시디시 체주 시여래와 먼저 풍부디 미다고래 중에 중제 가서는 계지기지로고요 그랬다.
Yes.
와 미다고 인데다 계지기지로고 그랬어. 동해와 인데 아니 저 풍부디 레다 녀모기 시마레스 다디 세브레도 먼저 지 류딜라 징 내나자 동해 마지와 그 릭디 라마미도 한절로 티 가레스나 그거 유 레다 녀모 되게 칸데지 펑션 조디 티뇨야레다 미슈지기 딜라야 믹세기 소조자스케 요마레 다디 람냠린 체나 요르메지 람냠린 마지니지 미지라 아니 셴와나레다 셴와로 셴왕세데 코라오메 그러 레다 뉴몽게 레다 뉴몽게 가와 당세데 되야리 미슈지 단당한저 레다 뉴몽게 레왕 밀류딘 레브레 안티왕게 다 제가나지 용고요레 아니 다디네 마시르드요 직전나 녜손라 제도고레 다바달라 최 냠네 마치니지나 아니 다 라요마레 다야고 직 상조네 상노다나 최냠네 체나야 고디 르딘디 샤제 도트비아딘데 용고요로 왔다 두저 동예 미다 동예체 디데제니 디체로.
So then, if we look at this first noble truth, the truth of suffering, we are meditating on these four aspects related to it. So, while we're meditating on the true sufferings is related to our aggregates, isn't it? Our form aggregates, the fact that we are suffering due to having these afflicted aggregates. So what's the first attribute of aggregates? It's impermanence, right? The fact that we have to go through momentary change. We all know that. We all know that we're changing momentarily. Secondly, that we are a product of karma and disturbing emotions. And in that sense, we're not free. Sometimes we get sick, but we don't have much choice in the matter. This is the second aspect of suffering with regards to having afflicted aggregates. We have to experience that. Of course, it might be a different case if you've cultivated a valid path, but for those who haven't cultivated a valid path consciousness, they have no choice. We are humans, and just on that level, we have to experience birth, aging, sickness, and death. And in that sense of having no control over it, there is a possibility that at the time of death, we might even have to go to a difficult migration. Right there, that is the suffering of the first noble truth. Second aspect of it, true sufferings.
다드네 동화서야 돼 갑디다 란제드베 제 유텐신이 딱동 딱지로만지 동 봐. 나디 네 풍부디 텐신이 딱동 레스 아니 다음에 왜인데 란제드베 제 딱동 레스 다디 임버와 제주디 상기도 하고
Now let's look at the third aspect to meditate on the empty nature of such a self of persons. On a gross level, we know that it's empty of being permanent, unitary, autonomous, or not made up of parts, empty of all of those. On a more subtle level, it's empty of being a self-sufficient, substantially existent entity, having some kind of autonomous owner.
다디 로저 셰윤디 아니 미다고에 로저 딱바다 용거로 아주 풍부데 딱바다 용거로 딱바 간데다고 그래서 나간제 계산기 풍부 드링 풍부 다른 쇼제 풍부 단기기 주저가기 공 주저 등기 공기 풍부 먼저 직받다거도
Yeah.
다가나네 딱바다서 인지민지가데 딱바에서 캘린식 말았다는 그 쌤게 딱바 진주디 그 당질 현재 요로
Yeah.
제가 아주 당질 현재 요인자 디레다 다가나는 가지 징지스도 나 예 풍부디 당기 풍부디 나주도 삼러시 단다로
Larilla.
아주 직바이 된거도 안디 이지 지기도 다가나네 당지 디왕게다 강의 먹부지 용되게 요로바다 단다로
Just think on the reality of our situation with regards to these aspects of the first truth of suffering. Impermanence. We cling to our aggregates in exactly the opposite way. So we cling to ourselves as persons as being permanent. We think that yesterday's body is the same as today's, or even the body that was here 5-7 hours ago is the same body we have now. It's almost like it's an instinctive for us. This is an inverse valid mind. That's not the case, is it? Think on it. You think instinctively you're the same person. So this is this first one.
다디 영서 고민양생에서 자고를 해서 배편도 전부 요래서 당부 고민도 좀 자마듬 나나 고민도 자비나 그래서 다디데 직벌해면도 당부 직벌해 냐면디다 이나면한 텐좀사다 직벌해면도서 이주점지 거차
라렐라.
안데 내가 줌젠던 다렘 당부다 감사합니다고 담통고 뭐라 미다고라고 봐도 통용고로 딜라데네 아니 미다고 곰자 데레다 두 삼다연데 아니 가래 펜도 가래요래 라위나 아니 만한저게 단다 셈나게 마지바당 톡바당 남도당 아니 지금 망고지게 수수 대변에서 탈산조지 수수 셈나를 주케용제 먼저 마지바서 거라 아니 내가 망고지 수수 시주요디 다 계절 드링으로 질려려선 네 미다워리 시그래 네 레라고 라그래로 드링 지도 벨레라고 라그래 수수 다 지도 시그래서 봐 다당하시 말해
야
봐 지도 시그래서 가서 상마 시야레스 아니 단다당하시 말해 섬사지도 다가나래다 디왕게 아니 산이나니 과야 사야 통야 근데 가시에게 별로 망부 대야게 줘도 아니 지 배셔서야다 근데 더 랑함다 아니 최고다 근데 랑함다시 아니 두주 망부시오지 근데 가는 삼문 땅지 망부에 차시려 있어요 가는 고호칭제 두주 상무 대출라도 되거든 아니 될라디네 맘다당 톡바당 레와 다 오늘 단다랑 지 계시 집에 최진 봐. 단다 general 있잖아고. 로 치제만신 순전 용화사들 봐. 그래서 치약이 제망고 순야기 남림나라 간서 미 고미운데 다도 남림나라 수자제. 제단도 다 남림게 냠내라는 도고요. 봐. 도인데 다 치와 이 남징에메 집에서 주면도 강을 예매도만이 류디다. 지금 남징에메 될라야다. 지 로와 겐고인 버터 긴고인 방에로 돈인도 로춘주인 방에로 돼요. 뭐 카실로 부궁에로 통 아마 제라데 부구다 뭐 아마도 뭐 보도 제라데 요든데 뭐더러 제가 수수수응에로 동에 댄스케요 말아 근데 삼다는 지상하다 당원에지 가주 톱도기 최 다가랑 갈 삼다름이시다 시부시부지 민독서도 신다가 내주디게 창마 지 가서래 지고도 당고 린당지링 메어지 신지 중은 저 쇼지 되고라 린당로 저 개중으로 쇼지 sö제네 디야 냐제네 디 간로 직직만디르시 데드다 단데 미다베 상단다 다두서 내주 청중지 야 전부 sö제도 아니 소소 삼려나라마 지 삼바 표식시라고 하던데 미다고 상단다 딘데 용구요로 다디 미다고 공배 편연도서 상로 단기 미다고 고미야도다 양세 공고고요래서 상로 땅고요래서
To meditate again and again on impermanence has tremendous benefit, really tremendous benefit, because one might start out thinking that one is the same person, but if you recall in one's own impermanence again and again, you might start to a fact tending toward the doubt of the fact, and you might start to bring into your lines of meditation reasons to support the fact that, in fact, you are going through this momentary disintegration. Of course, one won't be able to realize the subtle impermanence straight away, but on that gross level, we can start to see it happening. So we should do that, and the benefits are great. Now, benefits, because really for us, the benefits are that it applies a countermeasure to us being ill at ease. And what's being meant here is that often we dwell so much on these past stories and histories, and we get sad about it, we get mentally a bit down about it. And although we might say from the mouth, oh, I know I'm going to die, you know that's a reality, you say it from the mouth, and death is there, it will happen, but you somehow think in an underlying sense, not now for me, I won't die soon, or I won't die tomorrow. And with that as a kind of background,
tomorrow tingit서 야구래서
yeah, with that as a background, you are constantly revolving these plans about tomorrow's clothes, tomorrow's food, tomorrow's money, and with all those thoughts of a permanent sense of self comes worry, comes plans, comes almost like a sense of self-deception. The danger there is that you might waste your time because of the worry, because of the thoughts, and also because of the hopes. And if we reflect on the death and impermanence meditations as they're laid out in the Lam Rim text, as it says in the teachings on death and impermanence, the conditions for death are actually vaster than the conditions for life. So the conditions to preserve our life are actually less. So in the Lam Rim, we look at these three basic roots around death, isn't it? Death is definite. We're not sure of the time. And at the time of death, we can only take our insights with us when we die. Well, in terms of the kind of the first one, the uncertainty of death, the time around it, well, sometimes people, the young people in a family die before the elders. That is possible, right? And even sometimes, like, let's say that the grandfather or the grandparents, grandmothers and fathers, they outlive the children. So there's really a lack of certainty there. Now, when it really goes into your mind, this lack of certainty, it really becomes dharma, because you start to think, oh, this is really the case. This notion of gross impermanence is really the case. And then what happens is these other things that you previously clung on to start to have less value. Rintang meba. They start to have less of a value. But actually, in reality, for us, it's the opposite. We are caught up in valuing these lesser things. And because of valuing lesser things, small things are a big deal for us, when it actually is the opposite. When you meditate on death and impermanence, these small things that we cling to become small things, and the reverse is that the death and impermanence becomes a reality. So these ephemeral things you don't cling to as much.
Last year, one my father's sister, and she passed away. And she had 3 children.
Children.
1 daughter, 2 sons. And then she had some grandchild, right?
Grandchildren.
And all passed away before. Yeah, all gone. And finally, only she lived. And then she maybe stayed there, rest house. 2 years being stayed with my sister's house. And then 2 years another my cousin's house. And then the government, China government, give opportunity give the rest house. She stayed there 3 or 4 years. And then New Year, all body, my sister, and she likes my sister. And then she's sick last year. And then they ask all cousin come to went on this place in the hospital. And the hospital says now we can't do nothing. We just make happily dead and she want to go back rest house. And then rest house only daytime look after, nighttime nobody care. And then my sister and 3, 4 cousin 2 hours, 3 hours and return look after nearly 1 month, and she passed away. She is last her all parents go, 3 children, maybe 2 grandchildren go pass. This is exactly raw.
Yeah.
Exactly. True. May understand this situation. Some people are thinking, oh, grandparents go fast, young people give left. This is wrong. Oh, dinero. That is a winizero. You know, the Salmadan de came to when is the son. Okay, she will never came into. Korajab Susungela to Namjing Mesa, Talamrina, Chiwangi, Namjing Mesa. And Chigam Mashi, Sunjanyo, Sierra, Lu Yamchua on the Lu. And Roman Shiggy on the me, and that the Da Dang Lang Chen Dang Dozo Yorwa, to this Bule on the joy, Carsona, on the Tasagi and things are chemical mangosagi ora. She chojore, took Shevadaga, Rigo some top things are Mimango, Rige, Lawakang Chagdo, Carsona, Rigo sop the chara. The Ricochet Rigo Nima men char is Sigdora, England, no bed and Nima maybe in the Rugo and Nima men in Rugo del Nuva Madani, Rugo Tago maybe charo. Sigdo, that's Hamangusagera on the Sakala Troy with the Sadding on the Rigo some sop the Seshara. 아니 또요 말다 파툭 채우다가 탁 수유탄
Okay.
아니 시다고 타고 제약입니다. this is 다 하와도 가라서 대다 배는 아래 가라서 야지 로야들리 산조래도 배 삽삽체 비지 시다치기요 말해. 남자 지고 말해. 좋아지 내가 같은데 때때지 제일 하드는 가래요. 봐. 이는 수수 최제 컨디션에도 다다체 너 내가 남자 제 지금 쉬우지게 시리어스 내용 말해. 그걸 하나라 개면도 거라 갈라 둘로 투야다 둘로야 뒤야도 치료 하나라 가래라고 봐 하지는 학배 그제 치료 받기도 해 개개 둘로더라 가시 쉬우지 지도 타를 쉬우 체제 얘디 다디 초카래로 제장 다 누상단데 당원에 된거저 샘디 즉 추여가는 삼 가져 단도 단지 대해서 설려체는 삽삽체다 뒤견전하서 맨폰에서 쉬우지 랍디기다 원에 다지 맨폰에서 데스 마찬하나 직리다나 차루다 아니 야로 좀 차도 소엘 칼레카보다라 아무도 당원에 로야 근데 삽삽체 당원에
So then, it's a reality, what was just mentioned about sometimes the elders dying before the young ones. Not much to think about reality when it's reality. You don't have to force it. So that lack of the definite time around death and also the fact that, of course, the conditions for death outweigh the conditions for life. But there's also the fact that our bodies are actually quite fragile and weak. It's not like we've got really robust bodies of elephants or these vast creatures. Our bodies also, more recently, because of the chemicals we take, tend to break really easily. We've got bones that fracture, joints that are weak within those bones, and that seems to be the case. I know that in some of the countries like England where there's less sun, then in that case, when there's less sun and less vitamins, often what happens is the bones become infirm and the breakages are more. So then there's kind of a warning there that as one gets old, don't be too busy. It's kind of in a general sense, we should just be content with our Dharma practice. Turn your mind to Dharma, do your daily practices, and don't be too worried about these things, these other kind of lesser things like, oh, I've got to really clean all my clothes and get them really spick and span. Worst case, they get blown away by the wind. What's the problem there? What's being said is that one's mind should not be too hard and tight about these littler things. Try and turn the mind to Dharma, but at the same time, have a very kind of a relaxed disposition when you turn the mind to Dharma. I know everyone these days likes these kind of mindfulness things. That seems to be the thing. Well, if you're mindful, that's really good, because as we get older, we can easily fall down. So if you're mindful, you won't fall down and kind of break.
Yeah. 어딘데로 다디네미다 동에 동화세 동화라디 당아서 뒤에 퇴신이다 동화세 다지런지 동화세
Yeah, 니라디.
아니 다메세 아데 란제드베제지다 동화세 다디 지런서 싱그러 만작로.
Right. So then going through those next, or the latter two aspects of the first noble truth of suffering, emptiness. So those two levels of the emptiness, gross and subtle, permanent, unitary, autonomous, or not made up of parts, and then self-sufficient, substantially existent. And then the non-self of persons, that last one, the selflessness.
다디네 단단한서 동에 덴발라야디 데부 차례 그런서 데부로 와.
Yep.
또 코베기 다 쳐들라 규단 데부 디즈니로 열다.
Yep.
와. 당아란서 단다 동에 덴발사야디 데부들 와. 다 데부스나 benang aranzo 류덴들 와. 다디 규커를 되네 중어래 랍디. 너서 아란서 삼라 야야야 땅제 너서 파메기. 근데 직단이 랜더 진짜 중어디 갤렌시고 와. 다티 뒤준에 당에 뒤준에 저런 쭉 랍되게요. 삼로 당고. 뒤 공원을 가는 중으로. 딩이라. 로야. 아메 코베나랑 남시드 마슈고 뒤 공원을 간대요래서 뒤어들이로. 뒤 수수요래 간대 중으로. 저런서 군조 수요래라나 답대를 뒤어. 당소 낭베다 루체도 뒤 아니 군조된 말래. 군조 레지 군조나 녀몽 군조스로. 제가 레레 되는 총으로 직대나서 레레 기사로 레레 직대나서 기사 레레 직대나서 기사 제가 레레 네 직대나 주기 심진 되게 레레 되는 기버스 세운데 다디 낭베 수여셔서로 많이 봐디 또공 야 뭐네주디 수수심 누버드냐나 다 하고요. 제가 디 레디양 아니 즉 다가서 게임에 많이 봐. 쿠쿠네로지게 꿀롱라 되는 총으로.
Okay.
디레 최단 딜라 뇨몬 바스 디 군존 된 바스 규차들라 군존 된 바체 데부들라 동에 된 바스 다디 단도 닌식 거든 네가는 삼는 다나 야고요.
Now this second truth that one meditates on, true origins, well, this is the result, in a sense of we're experiencing the result of these origins in our bodily sense. So there's, we are experiencing the result of the cause of this true origins. Because if you think about it, you would ask, okay, so what's the cause of the body? Why are we going through these sufferings? And on some kind of level, we could say that the cause of our embodiment is our parents, the primary cause, as I normally mention, but we should think underlying or behind that, not just the fact that one entered through the womb, but then the question is, how did one get there? You could say from God, okay.
Okay.
Okay. But from the perspective of Buddha Dharma, the true origins of the result we are experiencing are karma and disturbing emotions. As it says in the teachings, know that the various worlds or universes and the beings that inhabit those universes are a product of karma. Now, this is not something that was made up by Buddhists. If you come to know your own mind, you'll come to see that this is the case. So what's being talked about here are motivations or volitions, karmic intentions that end in a result. And it's very good to think on the Four Noble Truths in this light, true origins, the causal level.
세상다 군종 된바들라 체주 시샤로.
Yeah.
규 군종 잡지 겐스로. 세상 단단한저 당저디 풍부의 판이기 레당 대군의 론지기 마리바당. 다 되자시당 콘동 아제도서 다도서 로고여라 뇽몬도서 와다 간다. 다 되저릭도서네 가르레 군종인 배균제데 유레스로. 규인디 아니 랑 데부 동에데 맞제와 제와 인자 아니 콜라 규스샤레스타로.
Okay, so let's look at the aspects that make up this second noble truth of suffering: cause, origin, strong production, and condition. Firstly, just look at the cause. Well, it's karma, isn't it? It's these motivations, and underlying that is the ignorance grasping at true existence. So underlying those volitions is this unknowing, confusion clinging to true existence, which is, and then independence on that, desires, attachment comes, aversion comes, jealousy, all these other nyomon afflictions come. And they're really motivations.
네 주 군중세한테 가서나 다 동해 잡아두지 동해군 동해된배 동해군 레다 뇽몰 되네 총어를 했다.
Right. So origins, really what you're saying is that you suffer because of the origin. The origin of what? Karma and disturbing emotions.
주 군중 랍지세한테 가래서나 다 동해 숙다제제 동해 규릉군제제 랍도 깨워서 동해 작보.
Yeah.
말아서 동해 작보 미카시에 동해 작보 쇼부 용거도.
Yes.
그것도 상마다 군중디 숙청부 쇼제 요와들 때네 주 레당 이 뇽몬디 숙청부 요와를 때네 아니 먼저 동해 숙다데 총어레스데
Now, this third aspect of strong production is talking about how sometimes the suffering is quite fierce and quite long. And that's because in terms of the karma that was created, the volition, that was quite long and, let's say, quite long and fierce. So then the production's like that.
다디 내가 올라간서 로종기 가두기 식두수 삼단도는 야보여래 동 가시엘라 동에 시 용거도 왔어서 다 경험에 레당 가시엘이야 저 레당 요모디 경험을 지고 말에 체들래 레당 요모길 되네 단대 동인이 와요 통준 연주지 레세죠 와
Okay.
레 숙청보당 요모 숙청보에나 데부디 체 다가라는 미야던데 용거 여러 와 제가 레 통준 연주지 레 체 다가라는 데우미야 저와 치만을 미야 저와 치매 치만을 미야 레 숙지중 요 인자 가시에지 단다라는 레 대인주장가라 하실라 제 가두이네 지 셈마지와 땅 르름 강에지 동 막뭐지 용대거도 와 근데 용대 땅아베 가스라 땅아 선바마지와 또 땅아 미신달레 껴도 진대성로 마다마셰 다 말하게 겨가마이나라 체대기나라 레 녜바 직숙참보 묘모왕기 직 레녜바 숙침보 사고 데부데 미송다 빼야고 총송 가오 공부래로 둘라가 공시 안서로 단다디 로종나라도가 단다 단다 동에 녀야 되게 아니 단다다 동에 숙차보 용버래 될래 땡아멜레 뇽세베 인자 아니 동에디 레 녜바디게 세베 인자 안다 치마 대화 용야게 당하대 띵기요래 제가 동해 숙창보 가져 주면 내가 동해들 가워 곰스다 다 되서 로종게 다 동일 남도 캐제게 람 다들 가라서 소응어 그나라 펜도 좀 간대요래로 그래서 삼로다나 야구베 요레스다
With regards to this third aspect of strong production, it is good to bring in the mind training part of the teachings when you are experiencing if the suffering you're experiencing or going through is fierce or quite strong or for quite a long time, one can think, oh, this is a product of past lives in some cases that karma is ripening. But also what we come to see is that often there are these different levels of the ripening of karma in its strength, in its length. So for example, sometimes the non-virtues one has done in this very life will be experienced in this very life. So that's the first level of how the difficulties can ripen for the person. Secondly, it could ripen in the next life, or the third possibility is at some lifetime in the future. So then it would be very good in the context of the mind training teachings then not to be totally upset and down on oneself mentally, thinking, oh, I'm the poorest because of what you're going through. Because if you really are putting into practice the mind training teachings, you will think that either this is the result of something I did in a past life or the result of something I did in this life. And now, what's the point of being sad? In fact, it actually says in the mind training teachings, it's better to be sad than happy. Because then you know that the fruits of your non-virtues are ripening on you and you won't have to experience them again. So now, because these non-virtues are being exhausted, that if that suffering, the conditions here, which are quite fierce, are being exhumed, stopped, then you should have a joy around that. Mm-hmm.
So because I heard that you said it's better to be sad.
That's correct. That's what it says in the mind training teachings.
But then you just said now it's good to be joyful.
No, I didn't. I said the mind training teachings, it says it's better to be sad than happy because the non-virtue from the past is ripening. So you should be happy around that. Happy that you're sad.
Ah, happy that you're sad.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of happy that you're sad. Okay.
Can you get the logic?
Yeah.
Geshe says that's not an easy thing to do.
But
Oh, sorry. So I didn't finish. So Geshe said, then in that context of the mind training there, with the negative karma ripening, what you're doing is turning adversity into the path. That's it. Yep.
that's 로종이 냠 가랑서 택버치면 쉬어 그나나 저도 랍진레도라 자심뭐 배우래도다
These are the great waves of the Mahayana teachings, the blessings of the waves of the Mahayana teachings.
유군중 랍지 다 젠로 젠세도 초체 버렸다 동이 제와체 벌라 초치기 요래 그
Yeah, so now that fourth aspect are the conditions that, basically the conditions that help, I guess, or support the suffering to fruit, to result.
다드네 곡댕 남바시디 곡댕세디 칼라고 그랬다. 제단다 당기게 아니 단대행 안저기 동행시도와 풍부디 다 자살다 대운용한테 대부줍자로 다디 유간내 중대에서도 레라네 레디야 아니 그노 삼바 아니 지다 되자시던 콘도 틴데 그 꾸네란다이네 아니 다 저 치마 디기 사베 레디 저 치마 냐와지다 튼도 저도야레 다 딜레직 펜심 그 꾸네란제 레딘데 사용베이나네 아니 지미다한테 저렌도야다 틴데 용구요레 다 틴데 그 꾸논디 아니 마리바레와 마리바도 몽바 마리바드레 그래서 틴데 라주니나 즈니주 마리바사드레 다드레 디다 방주여다 매스 디건 삼당으로 디 방주여다 매 삼당인데 다디 방주 계시 마리바디다 유템 자와디 데레다 나세야디 나시는 난지 직다치게 용어다 오데레 나시디 녜시디 셈나라 직샤 용어도 안디네 ngala sungyop chinyi chidu ene doja ngala newa jinyi judu ene kondo sa yongdo ti nga se di shila dine yonggo yoba inza ti jesu ene action da lu da nga da duzu action di ge yonggo da de lu ji le nga ji le yi ji le sle yongdo ti za le sum
Baril.
dile yongdo da dinde gi zawa di da kuno marikba de da demba tuwa nga rangje nga rangone tuwa nga dadu tuwa zimba na shinji yona 아니 다 고방도야 게 요마래 콜로로 버래로 그 zem바는 시 튀어라 요마래 콜라 잡된 세마 요마래 세상 디 에네 록조 디 셰연데 단데 셰러닝 분나라 소동보 동반이 소소술레 동반이 시기도 다 디레 그 오디 뎀버드베 동아레 딜랑한즈 뎀버드와 나 하시디 미수지레 데오메디 요로바지로 아 시디 칸 데오메디 보스라고 시우지 야사모 단데 자자 자탐바 유징원에 야 둡텐조제 샤데기 요로 디게 딱 강에 손이 창망은 저다 뭐네게 대범해가 되래 뭐네게 다 되래 봐 뭐네 란신ing부 손이 되래다 레미시 신다가 미다 된로도 좀 말해 미도 좀 미지 자래 잡잖아 수너버 전이잖아 거리 첨부래 될때는 거 닝지 쪽으로 될때네 내 뒤에 두주 내가 다 타도게 디지 몽부 두야 두줄 때네 용거요래 그 두줄 다 군을 단다 거린치와 곰스야도 저러바다 간다 재산 심지 신 거린치부 인자 로종 시계게 식당보디베 심지 담제 이신 누구를 뭐진래 장 하고 인스지제 중국도 하다 저저 랍쟁게 시그와 세상 어디서 삼았다네 제한도다 디모 딘지 마리과 데 가규유나 디 가베 아니 가과디 레온디 아니 레서고 말 레마서는 뉴모 마서는 동해요 말에 아니 다디 세베세와딜라 아니 곡dense 아직다 샤그요르바다
Now coming to the third of our four truths to meditate on in terms of the aspects, true cessations. Okay, so we know that we've recognized our embodiment or the aggregates are a product of disturbing emotions, disturbing emotions. And when we act out of that premise, we have these karmic volitions coming from an unenlightened attitude. So the afflictions that result from a lack of awareness, desire, attachment, aversion, jealousy, all of these things, when they mature in terms of their volition, they can fling us to the lower realm. We all know those three lower realms, the hells, the hungry ghosts, and animals. And then again, when that karma is exhausted, we can be in a human state, but still experiencing the results of those non-virtuous actions done out of those volitions, which were ignorant. So then we come to see, okay, so how does this whole process work? How do we cease it? We know then that the aggregates are a product of karma and disturbing emotions, which have underlying them this ignorance grasping at true existence. And this root of ignorance clinging to true existence is the first of our 12 links that sets that whole thing in motion. So now the question comes, can we abandon that root or not? Is there a countermeasure to this grasping at true existence, this unknowing? Because when you think about it, we're all going around with this notion of I all the time, and we cling to it instinctively. Not only do we cling to such a notion of I, but as an extension, mine as well. So there's always something we're trying to protect. Now, as we're trying to protect this I and mine, what happens as a result of that is we act by the three doors of mind, body, speech, and mind, in volitional ways, negatively, which creates karma. So therefore, it is really this ignorance grasping at true existence, or clinging to the notion of an I that is truly existent, that is in fact not valid, that creates all of the problems. As it says in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. In reality, the self that we're alluding to is void. It's empty. But it appears externally as if there's a kind of a boss or an autonomous owner. Now, when we cling to the self as it appears, as if it's a boss or an autonomous owner, that is really the troublemaker. That's what's called the troublemaker. But actually, if you reverse that and you start to see when you are harmed by others, you run into problems with others, when you meditate, instead of seeing them as the harmer, but seeing your view of the self as invalid, you can meditate on the great kindness of all, how other beings are just kind to you. And also in that first line of the 8 verses of mind training, seeing sentient beings as more precious than a wish-granting jewel, I shall hold them most dear at all times. So coming back to, ignorance, then, so we're going back to true cessations, isn't it? So ignorance, really understanding that that is the root of karma and suffering. So therefore we have to apply a countermeasure to that, which is the true cessation.
세상다 디 돌아다 땡중 따르고 남샤 자와시라나 고물로 간진 땡중 많이 배초가요 많이 디지 동바 많이 배초가요 많이 송도 땡중 많이 쳐요 말했어 아니 뭐 덴버드베 동바 많이 게 쳐요 말했어 제가 인자다 쳐 탐제 찍을직 때네 총어 견야레스 라변데 당기 간저 말한저 창만라도 저 사바 소고 말봐 미지기 세대 상로시 거다 약보라고 제비는 예체 독자라고 제는 예체 강의라고 제는 알아 중스도 스도 즉 술도 랑자오라고 지 랑네 자자자탐바 위중원에 야 두된 요지 나와샤 풍보다 간라 되어메 보스 보나라고 지러다 안델레 이지체 대잡된 제와체 따디 당에다 관다 잡다 본인 상마 인 텐제 네게다 제수 돈데가 여러 거죠 다 상마 대풍 버당서 풍야 상마 대풍고요 이나가서 풍이 될 파야 로버체도 오늘 로버치니 될 다다 당원에 될라 아니 베가워체 먼저 내단데 데레다
Kishla Nagarjuna stanza again, please.
간지 땡중 마인베 초가요 마인데스 땡중 마인기 초가요 마레스 땡중 간지 동바 마인베 초가요 마인데스 땡중세 땡네 총으로 봐.
Okay.
아니 동바세데 라신주도베 동바 마인기 초요 마레스 따딜라고요라.
Nagarjuna states in the treatise on wisdom that there are no phenomena that are not dependent arisings. Therefore, there are no phenomena that are not empty. Emptiness itself is this lack of intrinsic existence, referring to all phenomena being dependently arisen. So the fact that all phenomena dependently arise was not made up by oneself, but we cling to this notion of I so strongly that if something goes well, we think I did it, and if something goes bad, someone else did it. So we're kind of exaggerating this notion of a self in a kind of boss-like way, in a sense of there being an autonomous owner. That is a non-dependent self, and we follow that. We follow that at the appearance level, believing that that's the case. Now, when we follow that appearance level, believing it's the case, this is where we get the loss. This is really what lets us down. This appearance of a non-dependent sense of self, an autonomous one. And because we befriend that, we fail to recognize that that false view is really the enemy. Yeah.
삼바마지오로체 남도로체 네 딜라야다 지금 암다로체 독보로체 네 삼바마지오로체 사그스그로체 다 쉬우지 단데네달라다디 강의 체슈로체 띠기도 하지는 종아라서 상말로그라 저선 데 강의 디셀라 이지미지 다 담에 똑사는 도저다 란슈기 가로그라 진다 봐지는 우중 고민식 잡지 되면은 되는 걸 훨씬이라고 차거든. 어디 거기에도 루야게 뇨에도 내고 된 루야게 탑라야 쉬더래. 요시다 미 가르시는 셔봐. 안 하고도 영화라서 지금 미 배샤 유니다는데 벨레케 셔고 말해라. 배샤 유나 유메나메. 담년다 유나메나 시도도 지야는면도 가지고 당기라서 지원면도 시도도 수수 심데 지고 님도 되라면서 창마샤야로. 아니 개면도 그러면서 배샤 유나요. 담 유나요. 미 유나요. 가르 유나요. 개면도 그 닝부면도 와 닝부면도 와. 닝부면은 닝부 가래. 닝부 담배를 하죠 그랬다. 아니 신도 다 딜러 직도스다 대고네 직도스다 딩한테다 주고도 세네 디간라 심디 나는 저지 쿠그러면 당원에 곡된세야디 권연들레나 낭배 추기다 낭배 추기 좋아라오디 다 고죽사디 되네 죽고요래 디 고죽마도 나는 디 낭바디 자성부 차그래라
Now the question comes, can we get rid of this notion of ego clinging or not? This appearance of an autonomous boss. Is it possible to get rid of that clinging or not to an invalid sense of self? Well, this is where true cessations come in. And really the cause behind ego is when you have what are called these sumiyishiganamdok, these thoughts of inappropriate attention that we always get, these discursive thoughts constantly revolving in our minds, thinking what people might say about us. So-and-so said 1, 2, or 3, and all the thoughts we worry about in this life about others passing judgment upon us that could make us sad or upset, or we might believe those judgments of others coming towards us. So then that's really the trouble right there. Of course, if you have realized the non-self of persons, you will have none of that worry about others talking about you or what they think about you. None of those projections or sumishkinamdo invalid thoughts will ensue. Well, let alone even having a direct realization of the non-self of person, just to do the breathing exercise through our experience is some relief from our discursive thoughts. So in terms of where others are, if they want to speak, let them speak. The other people that are concerned about money, fame or not, as we mentioned just now at the time of death, none of that can be taken with us. Name, fame, reputation, money, all of those things. None of that would have any essence at the time of death. So the question is, what is of essence? Well, there could be something in the Buddha Dharma that could have some essence, and that could be a path to bringing your mind around, turning the mind around. And in fact, you would really only start to get a taste of Buddha Dharma when you start to move towards this true cessation.
다 이제 그 곡바세야지 다 곡된세야지 된제 연구도 시와세야지로 딜라 대주시 곡바시와 canung이 녀와 중화 시라우다.
Now that third noble truth, again, there are 4 aspects related to that, which are cessation, pacification, sublime, and definite emergence.
제가 아니 곡바라비인디 그래. 아니 녀모베 사면의 제와 녀묘도비 파방바 매버 소와딜라 곡바 쓰르와 곡바 쓰리 녀모베 사면의 제와 라미 예베체들와 아니 매버 소와 인자 아니 데라 곡바 쓰르와 어디.
Right, now the first aspect of true cessations is the fact that because you've applied the antidote, the afflictions and the seeds of the afflictions can no longer return, they've ceased, hence cessation.
다 시발라비인지 가르스나 시발라야디 다 치쿠랑 고등 카두쿠랑 랩토고다. 먼저 샘들라 시월민도와 수수요래 수미지 남도 묘모 상로망고 예배장 샘 축대된다. 다 남의 공배 또 비운데 다 즉 싸워도 마서나나 봐. 즉 까르는 담에도 버터지. 즉 까르는 되게 상마 봐. 다 시 무비 로시원하시. 로시는 무비 상마 라로다.
Yeah.
다 시워서야 되래. 로 시스난다 무비 상마 매우 차로다. 로면은 차라다. 무비 된데디 로드 시스난 상마 예로다.
Yeah.
아니 시버디네가는 잠딩딩 지요로다. 어디 시와라야 되고 뉴몽바다 다 저런 게 되게 자와다 제와 뒤에 봐 매왕 소와 시버 된데네가 비슷해. 시와서 때도 티코랑게 고된 세브스 리토다.
The second attribute of true cessation's pacification, the word says it all. Here, we don't have pacification of mind. We don't have mental peace because we have so many thoughts. And, these discursive thoughts are going all the time. But when you realize the non-self of phenomena, non-self of persons, none of those thoughts are pacified. It is like watching a movie. If you take out the light from the projector, the movie is no more. So therefore, there's a sense of peace.
아 비비나 무비도 깨사고 잡디네 로드 세션은 잠딩딩.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so when you've got the TV going and the movie going, if you take out the power source, everything becomes quite blissful and peaceful and lucid, isn't it? No more TV.
시와지. 캬놈 써야 돼. 캬놈 봤어야 돼. 다들 내 녀모 사면도 제가 방법들이 돼. 원에 시대 다지 캬놈 봤지 연구하다. 코에게 최 가래를 롱제셔는 캬놈이야 개요 말고 닝구요 말이. 닝구 매우 통거래. 초면교 통거래. 거기에도 통인데 다 딜러직 배 단도파 칼라 신부사는 간저 양자 산이 주고도.
Yeah.
캬놈 봤어야 돼. 어떤 데려 보지 연구요다. 거기에 랩사서 나는 아디다 잉도다 디다 오늘 지와도 대 잠제 셈나라지 대화로지 코네콘도 표현하기 유연로지 연구요다 캬놈 봤어야 돼. 근데 그거는 코넬레는 디그와.
The third aspect of sublime is that the mental bliss is sublime. So in the reality, in the constraint of cyclic existence, there is no satisfaction. You always want more, and there's no essence to the things that we experience. Well, that's not the case here with this third aspect of sublime. The mental bliss, is great.
다 녀와 중앙라도 갈라오래. 다 녀와 중앙라도 그 코월랭 녀와 중앙라고도 동해랭 녀와 중앙이다. 거기 여봐이나 아니 동해 녀와요 말이다. 동해랭 녀와 중앙이래. 또 동해레 타래다. 어디래다. 녀와 중앙라데.
Definite emergence, the fourth aspect, because you've emerged. You've emerged from what? You've emerged from cyclic existence. No more suffering to be experienced.
어다 뒤줄라다 지 삼로당 곰자 롭존 채나 띵사고 망보다 자여도 유능한서 딘시 개점벌에 라고도 하다.
Yeah.
다 가와이나 딘실레 연구여라 제가.
Now, these are things to reflect on, these are things to study, these are things to meditate on, because we're always talking about how important the Four Noble Truths are. That's just been highlighted.
다 디네는 저 남바 뉴시자비나네. 다 람댕게 남바 종아여와. 람데. 다 중니로 사송아. 나 종아 잡인데 종아건 중이잖아. 뉴시자비로와. 다 람댕 남바 종아데 가레스 라윈데 다 데라게 dom시라고 되는 숨세나야고 요래라.
So now we're going to look at, we've looked at the first 12 aspects related to the first three truths, of which there are 4 for each. Now this last true paths has 15 aspects to it. So let's look at those and enumerate them threefold.
다디 델레야다 장가 시체워직 나체워직 북체워직 요래로와.
So in the book, if you have it, this Ocean of Sport, these are set forth on page 11. Division into 4, division into 5, division into 6, making 15.
다 니요 간데 체험으로서는 당봉원서 사제 상면에 있어야지 록지직 생고래로와. 아니 사제 세야들라 가래 상면 세야들 상면 세야디 지단갑디 이게 박배 람탐제라 상면이로와. 아니 사제들라 녀몽바 달라 사제 세야당 아니 똑바 사제 세니 니용고요 레스타.
똑바는
똑바
샘기 똑바.
똑바온 심게 똑바온
Yeah.
남도 여러 똑바 여러
Okay.
음
So then we should understand there are afflicted states of mind and non-afflicted states of mind. The non-afflicted states of mind pertain to the Aryas, and the afflicted side are when you have minds that are together with invalid emotions and the realizations from that as well.
다드네 당부시디 상매라요 남바시 상매라요 남바시 제로 당부시디
Right, so the first four are of the uncontaminated class.
다디 고름시디 아니 람딩기 제주시 람릭바 두방이 진시지 시여로 어딜 자고 여다
Now, these first four non-afflicted aspects relate to the four characteristics of true paths: path, suitability, achievement, and deliverance. This is, it also is page 11, but it's also on the next page as well. If you go into the next page 12 down the bottom, where it says the first four types, are you with it? Maybe better to look that one. Sorry. Yeah.
다디 디르와 람 릭바 두와 니진 람 세드 가레스나 아니 니중 그 삼바 제와 많이 봤음 바로와 녀와 좀 코알레 녀와 좀 류그 삼바 아니 타와 텐드 니니 그 삼바 대샤는 리르와 딜라 람스 그러다.
Now, when we look at these four aspects related to two paths, the first one is really when you have that, well, let's say a mind that's striving for liberation, that's uncontrived, that would be a path.
다 람 릭바르와다.
Yep.
갑디 릭바스야디 아니 다배 미dun초게 양타버 릭바 자샤나 와. 람 양타버 릭바. 람기다 내다 양타버 릭바.
Right, so suitability is when the mind has become so valid, it is almost like perfected. Yes.
다 람릭바 두바세데 카레라나 아니 두바세데 가선 세상 람디 곰 냠린 잡에 톱지 아니 중앙인자 두바르사 와 람세야디 곰 잡에 톱이 용거를 쉬지게 대다가세 곰 전에 맞아오세 냠린 마체나나 요아요 말이시다 먼저 두바 냠린 체세다 두바세 체사 람디 ngoodi 가르스나 두바 냠린 체베도 중앙인자다 두바세야 돼요.
Now this third aspect called achievement comes to be because you have accomplished a path and the entity of the path has been achieved. Well, that achievement can't occur without a path, so therefore achievement.
아니 시바디 니진으로 니진 수도다 니바 짐바스도 그 람디 공부할 때는 타발라에 토바치고 요르다. 타바치와 산지지 공부 토바치와 동일레 토바치와 유인상 니진스.
Now, deliverance is when you're delivered from a state of suffering to a state of liberation, or you're delivered to Buddhahood. So there you go, delivered completely.
다든다 디 람디 디 간산데 냠 똑바디게 수줄에 요래 삼다는데 똑봉원에 진이 상어디 박배줄에 요래서라.
Right.
이나당 애디 수수다 마야 지 박배줄에 요와데 수수 간저 치도베도 계시기 전에 야보다 아까도에냐 예 잔야시에마 되체로 예 단다 마자기 제기 치기도 하디 마 자야니 요러 간다. 다 니버딜라 나요와 나디 다 삭제를 예벨람 나세 또 똑바사제다 똑바사제 가래라나 베나간조 니도르와 수치리 튼지 똑바세 베나간조 간조 미기 툭스톤도 퍼바당간조 믹시톤도 간조 데메튼신다고 연구도 와 근데 지일 차용고다 어디 똑바디 치료 튼지 좀 제타데 좀 배진 봐봐
Okay.
어 디샤 똑바 디 삭제 디 님보시기 올라 나디
Okay. So these four we've just been through these aspects of path, suitability, achievement, and deliverance are really within the continuum of the Arya's mind. But I've been through them individually, kind of expressing a bit about each one so that we can understand their characteristics. So when we come to this second set, as you see there at the bottom of the page, it says the second is of 5 types. These 5 aspects are really talking about So for applying antidotes to the mind and the object that the mind apprehends being different substantial entities. So for example, seeing Yangyuralapta, Tempena Modi.
먼저 포바도 따라
Yeah.
따는데 먼저 신는 칼리고 포바데 파스체 먼저 미시도 그냥 대화메 된
No connection.
데메텐션도 실리도 딱 뭐에 내줄 가래 대화요래 그냥 제지그래 이나 먼저 가르따다고요래 제타데 그냥 대화메 왔다고요라 딜데네 안 가서 강에 먹고지 요데고요라
Yeah.
어디시고요라
What this is talking about is when you have an appearance of the cup and it seems like the consciousness apprehending the cup and the cup itself are completely different entities. So because you see them as being completely separate entities, a lot of problems come from that. So these 5 aspects are a countermeasure to that type of dualistic view.
제가 딜레야다 페이로지 밀람단 다니에다 미요다 미규다 유메나방아샤도가 네 그림시드다 밀람세야디 최담제 밀람세야디 가래라윈데 밀람세야디 셰베제게 셰와 코랑게 낭자지we 밀람지레메시지기 셰베 낭자 마잉기기 밀람지 요마르와 데나시 포바디 샤워 코랑게 배 샤산ጆ고 목지 레메시지기 샤워단 도메딘지 목지 요마레스 오니 메바세데 당고도 델로코르다.
So what these 5 are expressing is the lack of entityness of the phenomena, yeah? So the lack of inherent existence of the phenomena. So for example, why the first analogy is that of a dream? Because when you're dreaming, it is just the consciousness that's dreaming. Similarly, when you apprehend the cup, you have to apprehend the cup from the point of view of the consciousness. If you take away the cup apprehender, the consciousness, then the apprehension of the cup can't take place. So dreamlike.
미교 니와데 미교스다 미교 먼저 미도 찌라 근데 다원이 숨다 로든데 니숨 시통도 미교스디 데 미시 고랑기 걸라 다원이 숨난데 다원이 숨 요마라 다워지래 요마라 어디 다시 제가 그 샤워 고랑기 난자지 레미시지기 다원이 요마라 숨 요마라 로드 미도 찌다 안 하고라 대나신 당기게 네 치료그 속디 샤워 코란지 올라 낭된 요 난자를 좀 샤워단 되어 매된 여기 네 속지 요마레서 데리다 베든디가네.
The next example is the visual aberration like, which would be when you would see 2 moons. If you looked out and you saw 2 moons, knowing that, well, there are not 2 moons, but that's what your consciousness is seeing. Similarly, any external object cannot be seen without the consciousness apprehending it.
제가 마제바스 라윈디 셰발라 마데베게 아니 치료그 숙지 깨요 말했어.
Right.
숙세야데 셰바단 대화된 된jo지 셰바단 바 대화 요된 jogi 숙지 그러면시지기 셰바단 대화 매된 jogi 숙지 깨요 말했어 마제바스.
Yeah. So this is talking about non-production in the sense that there's no external form that can be apprehended separate from the mind that's apprehending it. So no inherent perception there.
미규세야데 당연하죠. 디 야가데 자조탈로 도스나나네 이런저 비지단 데디데 아니 디 체마디 추난신 동구도
Yes.
아니 어딜 미규세그로 와데 미규디 미시 코랑올라 나데 이런 체마추요 말와 어디시요라.
And then the mirage-like vision when you're seeing the heat shimmering close to a body of water, or it looks like there's a body of water. This is basically coming from the consciousness side. When you actually approach, there is no water there. So again, the mirage-like.
제단다 디 페르 셰왈라 마드니 숙디 아니 망가버레스 망가고 임비준 셰왈라 떼된 요 숙디 망가버레스 셰왈라 마드베 숙지 두에요 말레스 디셰고라 망가.
What this is saying is that the external forms that you're apprehending are consciousness dependent. There's no form externally that appears without being dependent on the consciousness. So that external form inherence ceases.
다 규메 남바스로 봐. 규마 캔서데. 근데 나제 잡제 제 듀싱 춘주지. nga jawinde na nga zu ta dang lang bo shi de de tong yong go ro ta de jen ko mi ko na xia wo ko rang ge nang jal ta dang lang bo shi de la nga jun cha de mi shi ngwe ni zu la ta dang lang bo chi yo ma ro ji da de nan xin so ma ne o de pe de ro dang yin ro
And the illusion like apparitions or apprehends when the mental consciousness can conjure up these visions of elephants, tigers, whatever, they are just a product of the subjective mind. They're not really there.
세상 딜라야 소만의 시와스 라비데다 되만의 수단 순진의 재직의 소만의 여된 여제를 메시 수단 순진 재타대의 요마래 수단 순진 재타대면은 안 수단 순진 좀 재직이 되만의 요래 소만의 요래서 왔다
나쁘디라와
소만의 시와
I'm trying to get the other side of them. Where is it? Oh yeah, that's why. Yeah, so that's why these are lacking all of these qualities. So the examples were given first, and what they antidote are the lacking entityness, not ultimately produced, not ceased, elaborations pacified from the beginning. Yeah. And pacified beyond sorrow by nature. Kishla dacha di chikla turant kemare. Dacha. Dacha. Eko.
밀람다 다니
에로 원이네.
다니 니와드레도 다니도 데스트루트도.
키아마.
야마 투션을 리다고 저요. 나와디 란신의 양일에도 란신이 양일에 대비 진이라도. 예, 란신이 양일에 갑디게 다 란신 양일에 대해서 돼. 다 똑바로 자위 인상. 네. 딜자고래 란신 이 양일에 대 슬라빈데 수단 순제 참마 제타되게 시비디 고 동화데 아니 란신레데 당분에 레스 되만에 요래 수단 순제 참마 제타되게 동화죠로 데 되만에 요래스고
알레
데 되만에 레스다 수단 순제 참마 제타되게 동화죠로 수단 순제 참마 제직죠로 어디 되만에 요래스 란신이 양일에 되었어야 돼.
Okay. So then this one passed beyond sorrow by nature, elaborations pacified from the beginning, form and the consciousness apprehending form from the beginning have lacked any non-interdependent relationship in terms of that form and the consciousness apprehending it, not being one entity. So therefore, pass beyond sorrow by nature.
The 장가등에 대해서 두셔 건다로 밀람다 다니에디 니버레도와 다니에세도와
Sorry, yes.
로 미교디 숨바체 미규디 다레 당보디 밀람체 니버디 다니에체 숨바디 미요체
어디?
아니 미규체 아니 규마스도서
어디?
도스리다 다 니버 다니엘라디 디세자야 말아 다니엘라디레 먼저 잡고든데는 깨파 잡송아 뻥 추게지 용거도 어디래다 게 파직 잡나 수직 용거도 다니엘라디 베테로 와다
Now, sorry, the order was mistaken. The second one should have been echo-like. So that takes place when one is in a cave, and when one's in a cave, and the sound comes back.
파 깨져라 파.
You sound.
수잡용거다. 어디래?
So the sound goes out, and the sound comes back.
어디 다니엘사디 다데르와 다니엘사디. 다그 송니데르와. 제가 네다 먼저 상라다 기 셔버 코란라 낭자지로 파 탁자지로 먼저 그 수수semla 나메 탁자지 깨지레미지 유 코란년에 다니지요 말아 다직래 되네 데 중된 유지로 지난신에 데 디시기요 하사 속디 아니 파직 셰베 파마샤신 유지기 속지 샤요 말아 간다 다데 당분에 파 깨직 맞으면은 투용해요 말아. 대난시 셰베 파마 셰베 숙지 용토가요 말아. 다니엘사데.
Also. So echo-like in the sense that if there is no initial sound, the sound can't come back. Similarly, without the mental consciousness apprehending the form's apprehension cannot be just like that.
다던데 뺑아디 단다디 숙치르든지 똑발 숙치르든데 동마동간 자송아. 야데 뺑아디 란신지드베 동안에 자초고요래 베데스. 자기요래다. 베디다 가와이나 자연 거로 있는 또 던다디 거두 봐주 고 저거 자요로.
Right, so now these five have been given as an example of the lack of disparity between form and the consciousness apprehending it, i.e. them not being of one substantial entity. But it can also be, these similes can also be used to show the lack of intrinsic nature of phenomena, just equally.
어디 대샤오로.
We'll stop now for today.
현재 줄은 요래.
Do we have discussion group? Yes.
다데 람데게 시시게 남바 뉴시잡된 셰요인데 아니 덴버탕 뭐지 미다 동에 동안 담에 유군주라 비견 고고시와 저왕이진 아니 단다디 람데게 남바 시당 아디게 마레레 자제 안 하고르데다 디 동에 덴베다 미다 동에 동안 담에 수수게 메제나나 삼노 단단라 자기 데스케지 셰도나 야고 여러 디게마 대단 곡네 여와데 칸데스 투비인 바로바
Okay, how to
곡네
see
여와데 수수 삼노 단 칸데스 투브세레 와 칸데스 셰니 용 투고도에 딘도라 드릴링 데스 셰도나 간단지고 딩남데 탄다가나 삼노 땅제네 바주 데스 암단 투나 야고 여러
Go through in discussion all of these 27 aspects of the knower of basises. That would be good. So through those different first three truths and the 12, but also when it comes to the fourth one, what were those 4, 5, and 6 divisions respectively for the 15 aspects of the true paths? And also important to reflect on one's life, that we are in the situation as was highlighted in the first noble truth of true sufferings, going through impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and selflessness. And we should ask ourselves, is it possible to cease that reality in this life? How would it come about? What would we do to reverse that reality of the first noble truth? That would be good to discuss. I'll stop now.
Page 31 for the short mandala.
Nanda Jenla Jeparashu Gozera Deshin Nanga Tinle Choju Jevatan Losa Tembe Tume Sasan Rove Meseta Do Negyochi Agorane Mendela Kane Yatayami.
Page 33, prayers of dedication. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Whatever slight positive potential I may have created, by paying homage, offering, and acknowledging my faults, rejoicing and requesting that the Buddha stay and teach, I now dedicate all this for full awakening. I dedicate all these roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best, by the victorious ones thus gone of the 3 times, so that I might perform the noble Bodhisattva's deeds. May the King of Dharma Tsongkhapa's way of Dharma practice flourish. May the omens of obstacles be pacified, and all the conducive circumstances be complete. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Saviour of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings, who makes extremely clear the path that is the unification of emptiness and compassion, to the lotus hold of Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the St. moral way, who serves the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjanath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honouring the 3 jewels, Saviour of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. By relying on the 2 accumulations of myself and others in the 3 times, may the teachings of the conqueror Losong Drakpa blaze for a long time.